jump into it.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome to all the attendees for the 40th anniversary of the West Coast Songwriters virtual Zoom conference. Delighted that you are participating. Happy that we are able to participate. The agenda this morning or this afternoon is to first have the panel members introduce themselves. I will give an overview of the broad stroke topics that we can cover. And then each of us will get into various of those topics and have freedom to interrupt each other at occasion with questions or comments or suggestions. So it can be a very ongoing dialogue. So my name is Ned Hearn. I've been involved with West Coast Songwriters since it was founded in '79. So I'm clearly dating myself, but I was not in kindergarten when it started. Also on the board for West Coast and California Lawyers for the Arts, and have been practicing law for 50 years, and in the entertainment sector for 44 of those years. Focus on private practice, now the intersection of content, media, and technology, with lots of work over the years in music, film, television, books, and related media matters. And it's a real joy for me to be able to be sharing this panel once again with these many, many years, longtime friends, Todd Brabec, Jeff Brabec, and Al Evers. So Todd and Jeff, do you want to introduce yourselves, and then Al, and then I'll give a brief overview.
Yeah, we'll be happy to. And yeah, this is great. We're so happy to be here. It's an annual event for us, and we really feel good about it. Jeff Brabec, I'm Senior Vice President of BMG. We're the 4th largest music publisher in the world. My role primarily is to deal with new technology and acquisitions in the company. I'm also a professor, adjunct professor at USC, where my brother and I teach the music publishing and licensing course. We co-wrote the book Music, Money, and Success, which is in its 8th edition right now.
You can see it right behind us.
Yes, a large. We do believe in self-promotion, as should all of you.
656 pages of incredibly good information.
And each sentence has a distinct meaning. And then the last thing is that I'm on the board of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and I'll get into that, when I start speaking about what I'm going to be talking about, which is the organization that was established by the MMA, the Music Modernization Act, to collect and distribute interactive streaming mechanical royalties. Todd?
Yeah, but Todd Brabec, for most of my career, which is actually 37 years, I was ASCAP Executive Vice President and Worldwide Director of Membership. In the recent years, I practice law and do a lot of consulting, and I teach at USC and quite a few other universities. So that's basically it. And we do an awful lot of articles. Most of them are legal, but a lot of them are practical articles that you can find online.
And Al?
That was short and sweet. Wow. I was just thinking, I've known Ned since 1980, I think, or 81. I have a company called A-Train Entertainment. We've been around since '85. We administer 250,000 songs now worldwide. We digitally release about 30 albums a month. We're very active in neighboring rights, both in the United States and overseas. And I'm thrilled to be on this panel with the rest of you. There you go.
And having many, many years of experience with each 3 of these gentlemen, I can certainly attest to their knowledge, their experience, the good values, and the reliability and responsibility. So I just had to put that out there in terms of how privileged I feel to be able to be sharing this with the 3 of you, and the 3 of you with everyone else.
Now you missed our good looks, though.
I knew there was one value there that I forgot, but but that's obvious just from looking at you.
That's
Yeah.
So
the audience, all of us have a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
Particularly when making jokes about ourselves. So a number of topics we're going to try to cover today. And it's many ways it's a follow-up to what we were discussing in our panel last year and addressed preliminarily in our panel the year before. And first topic will be the Music Modernization Act and the Music Licensing Collective and what that means, what it's, why it's there, and what its intent and purpose is, and what are the issues with which it's dealing and essentially working to put into place going forward with regard to covering, collecting, and allocating mechanical royalties, particularly or specifically in the streaming world. And the other topic that we're going to be getting into is certain issues involving the computation of mechanicals for streaming, and also some of the matters involving the digital or the consent decrees and how that affects what's been happening, particularly with respect to the PROs, BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, and the like. Also going to get a bit into challenges to those mechanical royalty rates that about a year ago were increased through the Copyright Royalty Tribunal activity, but are now being challenged. And we'll explore who's challenging it and who is not, and what the issues are. And then also perhaps get into some conversations about another effort to try to get performance royalties for masters in terrestrial radio, even though there are now performance royalties in the digital world. And perhaps get a bit into the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is now 25 years old, and issues involving takedown notices and shall we say, the lack of success of the implementation of the DMC in terms of what it was supposed to do with regard to protecting the rights of copyright owners, and what in fact has happened. So that's the broad overview. So I'll step back at this point, and Jeff, if you want to get into the MLC and the MMA and educate us, please do.
That'd be great. Thanks, Ned. That was a really good introduction, I must say. Very serious introduction also. There's a lot of things going on and moving parts these days, which you know the audience needs to know about. I'm going to first deal with the mechanical income from interactive streaming. This Copyright Royalty Board, you know, has accepted the fact that there is a mechanical royalty in interactive streaming, not in a service that just streams, where the consumer does not have a choice, you know, what they want to hear, but and this is for audio recordings only. But these are the services, the Spotify's, the Amazons, the Apples, etc. A portion of Pandora, where the consumer can actually choose what they want to listen to, and that's interactive streaming. There's not only a performance right, which is ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR, but there's a mechanical right, which is the future of mechanical income because of the fact that downloads are decreasing. Ringtones, I'm not going to say are non-existent, but it's not a factor anymore as far as income goes. But it's the mechanical royalties for interactive streaming, which are the future of songwriter income. In effect, what the Copyright Royalty Board did back in, they had a 2-year proceeding. The songwriter organizations were involved, the NMPA was involved, the digital companies were involved. They couldn't come to an agreement. So the Copyright Royalty Board actually instituted and made a final determination as to what these streaming mechanicals would be. It was very interesting. They had a formula which went over 5 years, starting in 2018 and through 2022. And each year, the rates would go up according to the Copyright Royalty Board. At the end, it'd be an actual 44% increase from 2017 through 2022. Now, the formulas and the computations, I must say, are extremely complicated. And I'm going to be very simplistic in my explanation of this, but there's plenty of stuff on the internet and the Harry Fox Agency and the NMPA site, et cetera. But in effect, how the rates are calculated, there are two main factors. One is the service of the revenue, or the revenue service, the DSP service, take Spotify, what their revenue is, and that's a somewhat complicated definition, but you've got revenue, and then you take the greater of their revenue, a percentage of their revenue, and a percentage of what they actually pay to the record companies to license the master recordings. So you've got those two factors. It's a greater of situation. And just to give you an idea, the two factors currently in 2020, the percent of revenue factor is 13.3%. So what you're doing is taking 13.3% of a service's revenue, and then you're looking at 24.1% of the percent that the service is paying to the record companies. Whichever is greater is the final number. There are complications if it's an ad-supported service versus subscription service. I'm not going to get into stuff like that. But once you come to that calculation, the greater of, then you deduct the royalties that are being paid to the performance rights societies, the ASCAPs and BMI. And then the final number is the actual mechanical royalty pool. And then all the songs that have been performed and played on the particular services will share in that pool on a 3-month basis. That's it in simplistic form. The royalty statements that we receive, they're very complex. The summary sheet has line items from A to Z. They actually went through the entire alphabet with their various multiplications, additions, et cetera, to get to the final number. To give you a sense as to what the numbers really are, I'll give you a recent statement from Pandora. The mechanical rate for one play was 0.000651. If we look at Spotify, 0.0005839771. As you can see, you need very good calculators to really pay these royalties. And as far as Amazon Prime, it's 0.0004452. We're not talking much money, but if you have substantial streams, there is very substantive income in this area. And as I said, at least according to the Copyright Royalty Board, these percentages are increasing every year, 2022. And just for your information, in about 6 months, the entire proceeding for the rates going from 2023 for a 5-year period will start to commence. So there's a lot of things happening here. The main thing that's occurring, though, that everyone should know about, is that the digital companies, other than Apple, the Spotifys, the Googles, the Amazons, which one am I missing?
Pandora.
And then Pandora have appealed, did appeal those rates to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And after a hearing on August 7th, the court vacated a number of portions of the Copyright Board decisions and remanded them back to the Copyright Royalty Board for further proceedings. The one thing that they did affirm was that all the rates would be retroactive to 2018. So it's not going to be, whatever rates that come up will start, these will be starting the day one, et cetera. The appeal and the decision, the grounds were somewhat complex. They were very technical in some respects. But I must say, going back to the CRB, I'm sure the digital companies will try to get a reduction and a revision in all the top line rates as opposed to just certain aspects. One aspect was that there wasn't a cap on the total content costs, a percentage that the service pays to the record company. They would like a cap on that, so at least you can't go past a certain point. There were lack of notice, provisions, failure to address certain issues and give the digital services a chance to respond. So some of it was technical, but others, could actually have a real effect on the rates. As I said, That's back at the Copyright Royalty Board right now, and the judges are reviewing it, and we'll see what what the final determinations are. But things are up in the air right now. But the only good thing is, at least currently, the digital services are paying according to the Copyright Royalty Board rates that were determined for this particular year. But what could happen is that there could be interim rates, but we'll see what happens in the near future. So that's what's happening in the mechanical rights area. What I'm a member of is the MLC, the Mechanical Licensing Collective. Now, this is the organization, and it's a not-for-profit organization that was formed by the MMA, and the organization I'm involved in, as I said, which is not-for-profit, was the one that was chosen by the U.S. Copyright Office to be the organization that administers these particular rights. And basically, I think all of you should go in to the MLC site. Basically, it's themlc.com. So don't forget to put the word "the" before it.
THE.
Yeah, THE. It will really give you a very good idea of what we're doing, how close we are to actually be becoming operational. We're due to become operational on January 1st, 2021, which is only a few months away. But basically, our role is we are supposed to manage the blanket mechanical licenses that the digital service providers are going to be using. In effect, they're blanket licenses, so they can basically use every song without liability. Our role is to collect royalties from the digital services, and most important, pay the correct copyright owners. To ensure that, our role is to build a database, a public database that you or any member of the audience, any member can go in and review their compositions. Our intent is to have the most probably expansive database, at least as far as mechanical royalties, that there is in the world. We're currently working on that. We have an agreement with the Harry Fox Agency where a lot of their data has been incorporated into the MLC's database. We're improving that data. We're expanding on that data. And another important aspect is that our role is to make a very, very concerted, good faith effort to find out who actually is entitled to all the unmatched income that is now currently being held by the DSPs, or in the future might be held only because of the lack of information on who owns actually the particular songs that are being streamed by the services.
Do you have a sorry to interrupt, do you have a number? Is there a number or an amount of money that's in that unclaimed account?
No, there really isn't. There are loads of estimates. There are low estimates, there are high estimates. We have not seen the actual monies yet, though they actually will be coming to the MLC for distribution. So until we see an actual figure, I don't even want to throw a figure out there, because certain people feels it's enormous sums and other feels it's just a few million. It's hard to say at this point in time because no one has any information on the outside.
Who is holding that money now?
The digital services are holding it. And basically, I'll move through this very quickly. There are committees that are involved in the board is made up of 10 music publishers. There are 5 majors, 5 really indie publishers. There are 4 self-administered, self-published songwriters. There's also a representative from the NMPA, a representative from the NSAI, the Songwriters Organization, and a representative of the digital companies. Those 3 representatives are non-voting members. We've got operations committees, we've got unclaimed royalties committees, et cetera, all of which are manned by music publishers and songwriters. So the organization is, as I said, not for profit. Our operational date is January 1st, 2021. Go into the MLC.com site, because you've got to register if you're a self-administered songwriter. You've got to become a member. It's not going to cost you anything, but you've got to give them your information. You'll be able to register your compositions. You'll be able to review your compositions with respect to what's in the database, make corrections. And if you're a songwriter that's published, that has a songwriter agreement with a publisher or an administrator, they will be doing the work for you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, but I must say, if you're self-administered, do not have a publishing deal, you have to become a member yourself. Yeah. Al?
I have a simple question. So starting in January, as a publisher, we would no longer have to register the new compositions with the Harry Fox Agency and with MRI. We would simply register them with MLC.
Yeah, if you're a Fox member, you can do either, as I recall, and I'll be very happy to get back to you on this, but I believe if you're a Fox member, if you do register with Fox, the information will come over automatically.
Okay.
If you're not a member of Fox, you do have to register yourself.
We are. The reason I bring this up is last year I mentioned at the panel, you know, when we get a new composition, we have to register it with Harry Fox. We have to register it with Music Reports. We have to register it with YouTube. It's an extraordinary amount of detail work in order to obtain the monies due. And if MLC does their job properly, that would be nice to not have to do all that.
Yeah, it definitely will. But remember, all we're collecting are the mechanical royalties for interactive streaming. So there are other royalty streams that you have to register. But yeah, it is supposed to be a one-stop shop. And the great thing about it, you'll be able to go into the portal, which is being developed right now. It probably be accessible in about a month. You'll be able to look at your compositions, check your information, correct things, and also get data reports back of discrepancies between what you think you presented and what's in the actual portal and website. So technology-wise, we're very far advanced. I mean, we still need a number of months. We had a very short time period to get this organization together, but things are definitely moving along.
So if you are self-administered and you're not a member of Harry Fox, but if you are getting royalties, streaming royalties paid to you, for example, from Spotify or Amazon, one of which in turn has been handled by, or some ways administered by, Harry Fox. If your content is in the Harry Fox database, even if you're not a member, that would have been or will be ported over to MLC?
If your content's in the Harry Fox database, but you're not a Harry Fox member, why would it? Oh, because what you're saying is that the Harry Fox Agency, their information has members and non-member information?
Correct.
Yeah, all of it's supposed to be going over, but if you're not a member of Fox, I would register it myself, or at least look into the portal to make sure that the Fox information is correct as far as a non-Fox member. And
ask that because there are likely people who fall in that category, and they may want to know that they need to go to MLC and be sure that they're covered there.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're not a Fox member, you have to join and become a member of the MLC.
Okay.
All right. So that's that one. Great.
Thank you so much.
But I can't emphasize the importance of this, and the audience going in almost immediately and finding out what they have to do and how they register the songs.
Yeah, and also because it's important because, you know, up until recently, you know, mechanicals were going down. Everybody knows that, downloads and physical sales and everything else. So, but the positive aspect is the interactive streaming, which has increased significantly, which is what the MLC will be handling.
And which is becoming more the norm as opposed to the physical download, which keeps shrinking.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you. That was great, Jeff.
Thanks, Ned.
And I learned a few things, which always makes me happy to realize that there's more for me to know and more for me to learn.
Yeah,
we're all in that same boat.
Yes. That's why I'm looking forward to the rest of the panel.
Todd, do you want to pick up the baton at this point?
Oh, sure. Let me just quickly give you a real crash course in performing rights organization area, including what's happening with the consent decrees. And it's really a discussion about ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and global music rights, which is the fourth PRO in the United States. One of the things I'm going to get into is just Jeff mentioned the type of earnings that a particular interactive stream would generate. And you can see it's minute on an individual basis. And you'll see also, because a lot of you I know are members of ASCAP or BMI and some CSAC. I doubt there are any members of GMR in the group and stuff. But the comparison of what the online digital streaming royalties are from the PROs, the ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR, are similar to the type of numbers that you're looking at for the mechanical licensing collective, which was Jeff has mentioned. So still in the PRO area, the traditional media is still where most of the money is, particularly if you have any type of success and stuff. It's changing, but it's important to know that this is a field where it's the annual revenue that comes into the 4 PROs in the U.S. is about $3.1 billion. So it's a huge amount of money. And the breakdown, which is important for all of you to know where this money is coming from, because that's what's based on the distributions, is for broadcast television and cable, that's the networks, local TV and all of cable, about $800 million comes in. For terrestrial radio and satellite, about $450 million total from all 4 PROs. The online world, all audio and audiovisual streaming, is up to about $600 million a year now, which is significantly improving each year. So that's a major positive in this whole area. Maybe about $400 million comes in from general licensing, which is bars, grills, live concerts, universities, anything of those type of natures. There's an additional $750 million that comes into the 4 PROs from foreign performances of U.S. writers and publishers' works. Most of that $750 million is writer money because, as you know, most publishers are collecting directly from the overseas performing rights organization through a sub-publisher or through a direct member. So that's really where the money is coming from. You have a lot of different payment schedules and rules involved with they're all different for all 4 PROs. I recommend going to the sites. That's an hour discussion right there, but just keep in mind that there are different payment formulas and different distribution rules for all 4 societies. So you can have a performance of something on radio or television, and you have multiple writers who are members of different organizations. No one is going to get the same amount of money for that individual performance. So there are a lot of factors in these payment schedules. There are time of day factors for TV. There's a lot of bonus monies where for frequently performed songs or high-rated Nielsen shows, if you have a performance in that, it can add significantly to your earnings. So to just keep all that in mind. Give you an example of the type of royalties we're talking about, which is really the thing that most people are interested in. I'll give you some examples of traditional radio. Here's this is a 3-month period. It's like 700,000 performances. A major hit generates about $450,000 in writer money, $450,000 in publisher money. Always remember, the PROs pay 50% to writers, 50% to publishers on any composition. Here's 150,000 performances. That's a decent sized hit, about $45,000 writer, $45,000 publisher. 10,000 performances, which is not a hit song at all, about $1,800 writer, equal amount publisher. There was a song I came across a couple quarters ago where it had 1.5 million performances on traditional radio in a 3-month period. It generated $950,000 to the writers and an equal amount to the publishers. So as you can see, you have hit songs, you can do exceptionally well in this area. And all the figures I gave you, more than 50% of the earnings were due to bonus structures in ASCAP, BMI, and ASCAP and BMI. So just keep that in mind. You go to Spotify and Pandora and stuff, here's a comparison. 41 million streams on Spotify, $17,000 for the writer, equal amount for the publisher. 3.5 million streams, $800 writer, $800 publisher. Pandora, 15 million streams, $3,500 total for writer, equal amount to the publisher. 60 million streams, $10,000 total for the writer, equal amount to the publisher. 1 million streams, $200 writer, $200 publisher. Again, so you can see the difference between the traditional media and the audio streaming services and stuff. Quick thing on television, network TV, you're looking at the primetime network show, you have a visual vocal between $1,200 and $4,000, Dancing with the Stars or The Voice, any of those type of shows. The range I gave you is depending on which organization you're a member of. A theme would be between $500 and $1,500 based on the Nielsen rating of the show and stuff. So again, if your score could run from $100 a minute to $200 a minute for the score, or equal amount goes to the publisher in all these situations. I'll give you one. So you go to cable, HBO, it could be $200 for visual vocal, $64 for a theme, $30 for 1 minute of score. So you can see where the money is in the television. You go to Amazon, a theme song on Amazon, you have 10 million episodes streamed, $1,000 to the writer, equal amount to the publisher. You have a visual vocal on 44,000 performances, $10.70 for the writer, equal amount to the publisher. Hulu, a theme, 10 million views of a particular episode of a theme with a theme, $300 writer, $300 publisher. And these numbers are similar to if you go to Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, CBS All Access, Apple TV, Disney, Peacock, HBO Max, Quibi. The figures are very, very low. You need a lot of performances to really generate any type of income. So if you have success in either traditional media or in audiovisual and audio streaming services, you can do very well, particularly, but you have to reach certain plateaus and bonuses to really generate a lot of money. So that's really it in a nutshell. Quick thing about the, for ASCAP BMI members, as I think you know, both the ASCAP and BMI are under consent decrees with the government. And as part of those consent decrees, there are rate courts involved if a user and the PRO cannot come to an agreement as to what reasonable license fees should be. These consent decrees are being looked at, reviewed by the Justice Department right now to see if they should be changed, modified, or gotten rid of completely, or at least given a sunset date. That's an ongoing discussion right now. You can look at the Department of Justice site and see all the different arguments for what ASCAP and BMI would like to see, as well as the users would like to see no changes. Songwriter groups would like to see some changes. So it's all over the place, but the decisions will most likely be made by the end of the year, which could have a significant effect on how things are, what the PROs can do in the future and stuff. One of the major issues is that ASCAP and BMI would like to bundle rights, meaning they handle mechanicals as well as performances, as well as other rights. That's an issue right there. The major music publishers, all publishers would like to see the ability to withdraw rights from ASCAP and BMI so they could license selectively, so they could license the audio and the audiovisual streaming services themselves rather than going through the PROs. That's a major issue right there. As I said, the user community would like to see the consent decrees stay in effect as they are right now. And one last thing, the Music Modernization Act, which Jeff talked about, made two changes in for the PROs, ASCAP, BMI, for ASCAP and BMI. One is that for the rate courts, there are rotating judges now to hear any type of rate case that comes before them, instead of an individual judge handling ASCAP, an individual judge handling BMI. And that for future court appearances, when they do have a rate court dispute go into court, in the future, they can actually look at what sound recording owners get, which they haven't been able to in the past, which has really hurt the PROs as to their rate structure. So sound recording royalties will be available in the future as one of the things that can be looked at in these court decisions. And that's pretty much in a nutshell what's going on in the performing rights area in the US.
So in terms of these consent decrees and the review of them, you mentioned that's being done in the Justice Department. So will the decision then come from the Justice Department, or will it be something that the participants will eventually try to compromise on, depending on where the Justice Department thinks it may come out on it. So it's going to be it's going to be not a court mandate necessarily, but a Justice Department decree.
Yeah, they'll come down with their recommendations as to what will happen, and the parties will then have a chance to, ASCAP BMI will have a chance to review those, as well as most likely all the other people who have put in comments to this whole thing. So that's only the first step that's going to happen here. Then it has to be approved by the court also. So there's a process going on here, but the starting point is find out what the DOJ is going to come out with after all this input from all the parties involved and stuff. And then it becomes somewhat complex after that, because people have to buy into it, and it's got to be finally approved by the court.
So then the DOJ will make a determination. Then the parties have the opportunity to say yay or nay, or argue against it, or argue for some other elements of it. And then eventually a court will make a final decision.
Yeah, or even appeal it, just as happened. The Department of Justice came out with that 100% licensing point of view back a couple years ago, which the BMI and ASCAP appealed to the BMI appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals, handling those federal courts, and the judge turned down the DOJ recommendation. So so now that whole aspect is back to normal, where if you're a user, you need an ASCAP license to use ASCAP songs, you need a BMI license to use BMI songs. You can't get a license just from one of them, which covers the songs in the other repertory, which are co-written.
So it sounds like there's still a lot of distance, shall we say, to travel before there's any resolution or any conclusion.
Yeah, and there very well may be no change whatsoever. Then the whole thing would just stay as is.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Al, do you want to launch into your topics that we had discussed?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both, because I learned a lot. And I think as someone who represents songwriters and artists and whatever, there's a lot to be gained from understanding these various parts as they stand today, and of course, as they're moving. So I love the idea that, you balance out traditional media, like regular radio, what people are used to, terrestrial radio, versus streaming service income, and gives you an opportunity to see where you want to be focusing your attention, what's important to you as an artist in terms of developing a career and maintaining a certain level of income. So I thought that was fascinating. We talked a little bit about streaming services and what they pay to the songwriter. We talked about this lawsuit that's going on with the CRB rate structure. It's interesting to note that Apple is not participating in that lawsuit. And of course, shortly after they chose, well, not so shortly, but reasonably after they chose not to participate, you saw this whole thing go on with Fortnite, which was fascinating, about Fortnite trying to set themselves up for direct payments, not going through the Apple platform, and Apple dumping Fortnite. So major battles going on over shares of income from consumers, and watching how people are defining their turf and protecting it. I found it fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about a streaming service. So there's an awful lot of complaining going on about no money getting paid. If you're a independent artist and you're going directly through a TuneCore or a CD Baby or one of the other aggregators out there, you own your own product, you're paying a certain share to them or a certain fee to that aggregator, and then you pretty much get what's left. If it's a download, and we talked about this before the panel began, if it's a download, it's a finite amount of money, right? The DSP takes a certain amount and you get the rest. If it's iTunes, it's a bulk fee. So it includes the master payments and it includes the composition payments. Same thing with Bandcamp, a couple of the other services out there. But then you get the Spotify's, which is the name everybody throws around and everybody seems to be the most interested in. And that's not a set fee. It's not a defined number. It's not the pool. Obviously, the pool of subscribers is growing, but you've got free subscribers, you've got paid subscribers, you've got advertising rates, which are providing the income on the free subscriptions that are different from territory to territory, that are different, from territory to territory. So you wind up with this moving target that's just not clear as to how much money you can expect on a master income from that streaming. Is it 0.003? Is it 0.005? Are you actually getting it, or is your record company getting it? I mean, people are throwing figures and allegations around that are just quite incendiary. What else caught my attention here? Yeah, Ned, you brought up the whole, the DMCA and the takedowns. We're in a situation right now with a fairly prominent writer, does very well. Somebody took his masters and his composition, put their own name on it, and released it under their own name through all the streaming services. Trying to get that taken down has taken extraordinary amounts of time, even though they all have their systems, it's very regulated, the procedures are very clear, but a lot of people aren't actually working in their offices these days. They're working from home. They're having trouble keeping up with the vast sums of notices that are coming in. So we began moving against Spotify and iTunes and all the rest of it 2 months ago. And so far, the only one that's taken it down is YouTube. And my client's sitting there going, what the heck is going on? Why is this taking so long? I can't give them a straight answer other than the person who runs that particular program at iTunes was pregnant and came back to a massive work that she hasn't been able to work her way through. It's very troubling if you're a songwriter to see that kind of stuff and to realize how little power you have in it. What else? The whole process of policing copyright infringements in general. You make your claim, you wait for it to be settled, and by the time it's settled, you all of a sudden find out that 3 or 4 more claims have come up in the same manner. It's a dysfunctional system, unfortunately, not pro-songwriter. What else did I want to talk about?
Hey, Al, can I ask a question? You're involved in neighboring rights, which most clue about that. And and they're really important, particularly, and they're becoming more important as each year goes by and stuff. You want to make a quick comment on neighboring rights?
Well, I'm going to step back and then I'm going to step into that. So one of the things I loved about what you two guys talked about was different income streams and how if you're going to survive as a creator, you've got to be on top of all of them, right? And I think that's really significant. So neighboring rights. Relatively recent concept in America, something that the Europeans, for instance, were ahead of us on, and in some ways are a little more expansive in how they see it. It has to do with the performance of a master recording. So this is not about a composition, it's about the master recording. In the United States, we have an organization called Sound Exchange, which is an outgrowth of the Record Industry Association of America. Sound Exchange collects money from Sirius XM, from Pandora Tier 1, from iHeartRadio. I could go on, but those are probably the biggest vendors that kick into it. And then they disperse it based on the claims made by the master rights owner and the featured artist. The featured artist section is broken down even further by if you have a duet, a featured artist and a duet, or a prominent band leader who you've promised a share of the income, or the producer on the, all of them can be entitled to a share of this income. What's interesting with Sound Exchange is I think every 6 months they change the way they ask you to register new material. They told us 6 months ago we didn't need to register any new material. We just had to go in there every month or two and look and make sure we were claiming everything new that was ours. Now they're telling us we need to actually go back and physically register everything new. In Europe, things that are income streams that are collected in the United States through, what is it, the AARC, is that correct? Black box income, monies that are paid for the sale of equipment that can be used for duplication and various other income streams. In Europe, that's all paid to similar organizations in one payment to one place. The equivalent, for instance, in Germany, GVL, the Netherlands, SINA. There are 5 organizations in Italy. Don't ask me to explain that. I still can't figure that out. One of them seems to be an upstart, and 4 of them claim to be fairly legit. But as you point out, this is an increasing amount of money. As artists aren't able to tour right now, having your material properly registered, again, as the master rights owner, as the featured artist, it can be a substantial amount of money. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, well, one thing, Al, you mentioned Sound Exchange because most people are shocked when they see Sound Exchange collected $963 million last year and distributed over $900 million out to the artists, record companies, and background musicians and vocalists. So very important source of income. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you prompted me.
And again, just to underscore, that's for the non-interactive performance of the masters.
Right.
Yes.
Which, as is distinct from the interactive, which would be more of the Spotify's and the paid Pandora tiers, Apple, Google, and the like. So it's a very, it's digital only. It's not terrestrial, which is one of the other points we discussed. You want to address that, Al?
Well, actually, what I was going to jump on for 1 second, and then I'll yield the floor, and that is that there was recently the Local Radio Freedom Act, which was an opportunity to move to terrestrial radio and to have payments made there for master recordings. And a majority of Congress said, no, we don't want that. We want to let radio continue to do what they do now, which is not pay for the actual recordings. And it's interesting because in Europe they do, but in the United States they don't. Okay, I'm done, I yield.
Just give that an historical context, and that really kind of underscores, I think, the power of the NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters. When sound recordings first became subject to copyright protection back in 1972, one of the exclusive rights of an owner of copyright, namely the right to perform, was excluded from protection with regard to terrestrial radio and the broadcast of the sound recording. So if you own the sound recording, you'd have the exclusive right to distribute it, to reproduce it, to make derivative works, but you did not have the exclusive right to perform it as relates to terrestrial radio. And that's been part of the Copyright Act since 1972. So these efforts, these past 10, 20 years, to try to get digital, not a digital, but a terrestrial performance of the sound recordings become a paid for right has just not been successful. And getting back to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in '95 and then the amendment in '98, one of the drives for that particular legislation was with the switching to digital performances of sound recordings, establishing a level or requirement for payment for those digital performances, and hence sound exchange vis-a-vis non-interactive, and then a negotiated rate for interactive by way of Spotify, et cetera. And this most recent effort to get terrestrial to pay is again just showing effectively the power of the NAB lobby to keep Congress from making those adjustments. And there have been some discussions and even efforts made, as far as I can recall, to work out a quote unquote compromise to have terrestrial radio pay for the terrestrial performance of the masters, but in exchange for reducing what their digital arms would have to pay for the interactive digital performance and the, I was to say, and the more importantly, non-interactive digital performance of the masters, which would reduce income that goes to sound exchange.
Right.
So you've got these very competing efforts to try to adjust what was now been part of the law since '72, but without any real success because of, again, the competing interests continuing to challenge each other, but the NAB having the power of the authority to keep that from happening. So, and the other aspect, so we're talking about the DMCA, is what you were referencing, Al, in terms of, and what I mentioned earlier in terms of these so-called takedown notices.
Right.
The philosophy, shall we say, behind the DMCA back in '95 and again in '98 was, okay, digital entities, you're new, you look like you're going to become an established, important platform, but there's all kinds of ways that people can upload content to your platforms that could include copyrighted content of others. So we're going to give you, this is in the legislation, a safe harbor.
Right.
So that if that does happen, you're not automatically in a position where you're being pursued or could be pursued for copyright infringement. But part of the trade-off was you should be supervising that. Well, 25 years later, that supervision has been at best spotty. And the drive that the digital platforms have in terms of generating income, not just from the views, but from the advertising that they get from the views, has enabled them essentially to not, shall we say, honor that deal. And you sent me some great information presentation that Don Henley had made in terms of the failures of the DMCA relative to protecting the interests of the copyright owners and the digital platform service providers not honoring that bargain, that is, protecting the copyright interests. And even the Copyright Office has now come out with an opinion that essentially the DMCA vis-a-vis those aspects is not working.
Yeah.
And it's totally out of balance, and quote unquote, things need to be done. But that at the end of the day, I think will essentially be a congressional issue. So it's, I suspect it's going to be some time, if ever, before we get Congress, or before we're able to see Congress focusing on this. But that was the deal. But the deals, from what I can read and understand and experience, is really not being honored. And the power of the lobbying power of the digital media platforms is strong enough to be able to effectively do in the digital medium what the NBA has been doing in the terrestrial venue.
And I don't see this.
Editorial.
No, and I don't see this Congress addressing it.
No.
They have other things on their plates.
which they also have difficulty addressing, but I won't get into that.
Right. Or undressing. Oh, sorry.
So, well, this has been, I think, really, really useful and informative. I'm looking at the clock, and we're supposed to be, I think, shortly wrapping up. So, so we can facilitate a good segue from the end of this program to whatever is going to be done next. So, any comments, any last observations that any of you want to make in terms of what we've discussed or ideas that have popped into your head since during the course of our conversations?
I think, you know, from my point of view, what Al mentioned near the start about you've got to know these days every type of source of income possible. I mean, when all of us started our careers, there were maybe 4 primary ones: record sales, mechanicals, performances, sync, and foreign. Now you've got to know there's holograms, there's apps, there's e-cards. In addition, you know, so many others. You really have to pay attention and know how each deal is structured,
And to register in all the different avenues. Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't even really referenced the social media platforms that are utilizing content and how they quote unquote compensate for that usage, which is another whole layer. But just again underscores the huge variety of income potential and the challenges of trying to monitor and monetize that.
And I promised you I was going to say this, so I'm going to. You brought it up, social media.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Jeff Bezos and Twitch not have to license music for their streams?
Is there an answer to that? Other than
the one we know?
power and size?
Exactly.
That's next panel.
Well, gentlemen, this has been great. It's more of a delight to do it in person, but it's been a real delight to be able to do it at all. And speaking of technology, I guess we can thank the creators of the Zoom media to be able to facilitate our doing that.
Definitely.
Hopefully this time next year, we'll be able to do it again, but in person.
I hope